Okay, let's dive into this explainer. Today, we're going to explore how three German brothers made absolutely mind-boggling billions of dollars using a business strategy that is, well, it's as highly controversial as it is ruthlessly effective. We're looking at a story that completely flips the traditional script on innovation. Look, some people call these brothers absolute geniuses of capitalism. Others, they call them ruthless, unoriginal copycats. But no matter where you stand on that spectrum, their story provides a perfect step-by-step masterclass in aggressive business scaling. We are going to deconstruct exactly how they built an empire, not by inventing the future, but by meticulously stealing it. So let's start with a really bold question, one that challenges pretty much everything we think we know about successful startups. If I told you there was a perfectly legal way to effectively cheat your way to massive success, would you believe me? I mean, we've all been fed this traditional startup myth, right? The lone genius in a garage, suddenly struck by a lightning bolt of inspiration, inventing something the world has literally never seen before. We idolize that light bulb moment. But what if that obsession with originality is actually the very thing holding you back? Now, to be clear, we aren't talking about scams or fraud or stealing money. We're talking about a strategy that requires an insane amount of effort, but it completely bypasses the absolute hardest, riskiest part of starting any business, proving that people actually want what you are building. The secret to this so-called cheat code isn't fraud. It's actually about swallowing your pride and flawlessly copying established winners. Just think about the sheer agonizing pain of sitting around for years, staring at a blank whiteboard, waiting for that perfect, never-before-seen idea to finally strike. It's paralyzing. The smartest and, very often, the wealthiest operators in the world do the exact opposite. They study the winners, they map out business models that have already been battle-tested, models that are already proven to generate serious cash. And then, they copy the entire system with a ruthless, almost mechanical efficiency. They realize that getting rich isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the fastest to execute what already works. Here is exactly how we're breaking this down today. First, the myth of originality. Then, the 100-day eBay clone. Next, the copycat success formula, followed by the Airbnb clone disaster. Then we'll cover building trust and billions and wrap it all up with 5 rules for stealing. All right, let's jump straight into part 1, the myth of originality. We begin this whole crazy journey back in 1998 with a guy named Oliver Samwer. He was a brilliant, highly ambitious German business student, and he was entirely obsessed with Silicon Valley. He kept watching these young founders become overnight millionaires, and he wanted to understand exactly how they were pulling it off. But Oliver didn't just casually read magazine articles. He actually co-wrote a university thesis where he interviewed over 100 Silicon Valley insiders. We're talking founders, CEOs, venture capitalists, lawyers, the whole shebang. He was hunting for patterns, and what he found was blindingly clear and honestly kind of shocking. The investors told him time and time again, an A-plus execution of a B-minus idea beats a B-minus execution of an A-plus idea every single time. It literally wasn't the brilliance of the concept that guaranteed success. It was the sheer speed of execution, launching at the exact right moment and scaling aggressively before anyone else could even tie their shoes. Fast execution absolutely beats brilliant ideas. Which brings us to part 2, the 100-day eBay clone. So, armed with this massive realization, Oliver, along with his older brother Mark and his younger brother Alexander, set their sights on bringing a massive American success story to Germany. Oliver saw that the internet boom was completely exploding in the US, but Germany was lagging way far behind. His prime target was eBay. Now, Oliver actually reached out to eBay headquarters at first. He sent them emails offering to help them expand into the European market, and they completely ignored him. So the brothers looked at each other and basically decided, okay, if eBay won't come to Germany, we are going to build eBay for Germany. In early 1999, they launched Alando. Was the concept original? Not at all, but the execution? An absolute masterclass. They literally manually studied eBay's HTML code. They translated every single category, every layout, every function perfectly into German. But here's the catch. A marketplace is a ghost town without products, right? So in the very beginning, the brothers were frantically running around their own homes, listing their childhood toys, old coins, just random personal items, entirely to create the illusion of an active, bustling marketplace. It was pure, unadulterated hustle. And guess what? It worked perfectly. eBay executives over in the US quickly realized they had a massive problem on their hands. A flawlessly executed, fully localized clone had just captured the highly valuable German market right under their noses. There was no way they could risk a competitor establishing a stronghold in Europe while they tried to build something from scratch. Panic set in.
So instead of fighting the Samwer Brothers, eBay flew out to Berlin with their checkbook wide open. Just 100 days, let me repeat that, 100 days after the brothers launched Alando, eBay bought the company from them for $43 million. I mean, let's just do the math on that for a second. That is roughly $430,000 a day just for perfectly executing someone else's idea. In just over 3 months, these brothers became multimillionaires.
Let's move on to part 3, the copycat success formula. Now, you think they would just take their $43 million and retire to a beach somewhere, right? Not even close. The brothers realized this wasn't just some lucky fluke. They had essentially discovered a repeatable pattern for massive wealth, and they decided to industrialize it. They created Rocket Internet, which was basically a literal startup cloning factory. They built this hyper-aggressive 7-step playbook. Let's walk through it. First, you scan the world for fast-growing startups. Second, you dissect exactly why their business model works, down to the absolute finest detail. Third, you find a virgin market, somewhere the original idea hasn't touched yet, like Europe, South America, or parts of Asia. Fourth, hire incredibly hungry, driven operators who will literally work around the clock. Fifth, launch at breakneck speed. Sixth, spend aggressively on marketing to dominate consumer mindshare right out of the gate. And seventh, scale so incredibly fast that by the time the original American company finally looks at that market, their only logical choice is to just buy you out. And they aggressively applied this exact formula over and over again. Take the early 2000s, for example. They looked at the exploding mobile content business and created a company called Jumba. Now, if you were around back then, you absolutely remember the inescapable Crazy Frog ringtone. Yep, that was them. Rocket Internet capitalized on that existing mobile content trend, scaled it ruthlessly across the globe, and then cashed out, selling the company to VeriSign in 2004 for a staggering $270 million. Later on, around 2009, they noticed that a daily deals site called Groupon was spreading like wildfire in the US. So what did they do? They launched CityDeal in Europe using that exact same 7-step playbook. Fast movement, aggressive hiring, reaching out to local merchants on the ground in literally every major European city. They built a moat around Europe so insanely fast that Groupon, which at the time was gearing up for this massive IPO, they couldn't afford to fight them. Groupon desperately needed those European numbers to boost their valuation for the public offering, so they were practically forced to buy out the Samwer Brothers for an eventual value of $267 million. This formula was undeniably almost frighteningly effective. But of course, nothing works forever. Here is part 4, the Airbnb clone disaster. Shortcuts have limits. Eventually, this flawless system crashed headfirst into a brick wall. The brothers spotted Airbnb growing massively in the US, and naturally, they decided to apply the Rocket Internet formula. They created a European clone called Wimdu. They poured an unbelievable amount of cash into Wimdu, copying the Airbnb website pixel by pixel. There were even massive allegations of wildly aggressive tactics like mass messaging and trying to poach actual Airbnb hosts. They expected the exact usual outcome. Airbnb's founders would get intimidated, they'd panic over losing Europe, and they'd write a massive check to buy Wimdu. But Airbnb's founder Brian Chesky saw it totally differently. He refused to be bullied. He flat out refused to buy them out. Chesky recognized a fundamental difference in how the two groups operated. He looked at the Samwer Brothers and saw mercenaries, guys just chasing fast cash. But he viewed his own team as missionaries, driven by a deep, authentic vision and a real community culture. Think about it. You can easily copy a website's code in an afternoon, but you absolutely cannot copy the soul and the trust of a community. Chesky basically called their bluff, and Airbnb won the global market. So, what do you do when the ultimate cheat code fails? Part 5, Building Trust and Billions. Suddenly, the brothers were left holding this massive, wildly expensive, cash-burning company that they couldn't sell. They learned the absolute hard way that culture, trust, and brand reputation, those cannot be copy-pasted. It was a massive wake-up call for them. When the shortcut failed, they realized they actually had to learn how to drive the car for the long haul. Look at the timeline here. The early days were all about the quick flip. Alando in '99, Jumba in 2004, but post-Wimdu, their entire strategy had to evolve. They started a company called Zalando, which was initially inspired by the American online shoe retailer Zappos. But this time around, instead of just trying to force a quick sale, they adapted. Actually, scratch that. They completely committed. They went through the grueling, painful transition of managing massive physical warehouses, building complex local logistics tailored specifically to European geography, and fundamentally, they had to earn real customer trust. They shifted from being a fast cash copycat factory to genuine long-term builders. This all culminated in them taking Zalando public and creating a retail giant valued at roughly $5 billion. When they finally decided to play the long game, that is when they made their biggest fortune yet.
Let's wrap this up with part 6, 5 rules for stealing.
Let's distill this entire wild ride into the core lessons that you can actually apply to your own ventures without crashing and burning like Wimdu did. We tend to obsess over the 1%, right? That flash of inspiration, the magical, completely unique idea. But we completely ignore the 99%, the grueling, unglamorous, everyday execution. The data here is clear. Getting rich fast isn't about sitting around waiting for a perfect idea. The overwhelming majority of success is almost entirely about how relentlessly you execute and adapt. You absolutely do not need to reinvent the wheel to build a profoundly successful business.
So by following 5 core rules drawn directly from the Samwer Brothers evolution, you can turn proven concepts into sustainable success. Rule number 1, start from proof, not zero. Look for what is already working out there, what's already gaining real traction in the market, and build from that baseline. Rule number 2, steal the thinking, not the thing. Don't just rip off a logo or a color scheme. You have to understand the deep structural mechanics of why that business works on a fundamental level. Rule number 3, collect ideas like a student. Analyze successful companies deeply to build your own playbook of what works. Rule number 4, local adaptation is your true innovation. Remember the German eBay clone? Taking a US idea and solving the highly specific payment, logistical, and cultural hurdles in Germany or wherever your local market is. That in itself is a massive form of innovation. And finally, rule number 5, trust builds long-term wealth. Aggressive copying might get your foot in the door, for sure, but as they learned the hard way with Zalando, building genuine customer trust is the absolute only way to build a multi-billion-dollar empire that lasts.
I want to leave you with this final thought to really challenge your approach to business. Which trap are you currently falling into? Are you so obsessed with being wildly original that you absolutely refuse to learn from proven models? Or are you staring right at proven models, but you simply lack the intense, disciplined execution required to bring them to life in your own market? Are you too proud to copy or just too lazy to execute? The cheat code isn't some secret magic formula. It is simply the willingness to put execution completely above your own ego. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.